What's up? Zach Attack Pack. I built the perfect and most realistic UFC 300 dream card from the early prelims to the main event. Let's get going. To start off our early prelims, we've got Joe Pyfer versus Bo Nickal. Friendly fire has been disabled. Ginger versus Ginger. I think these are two up-and-coming middleweight prospects. I think Bo can test Joe's wrestling, and I think Joe can test Bo's chin. Next up the ladder, we've got Kai Kara-France versus Manel Kape. Yes, there's been some bad blood brewing. Both of these guys were supposed to fight. We're rescheduling it for UFC 300. You're going to see powerful striking, some technique on display, and some rankings on the line. Next up the ladder, we've got Tony El-Cucuy Ferguson versus Jim Miller as a retirement fight. I think this is perfect. Tony used to have a 12-fight win streak in this division. Never got a title shot, but the future now is nothing but losses. Tony has even blocked me on Instagram for mentioning it's no longer Tony time. So I'm hiring in Jim Miller as my official UFC hitman, and I think he can get it done because Tony is too stubborn for his own good. He's too tough. He's got bad fight fundamentals and habits, and I think Jim Miller can expose them. He's aged himself. Jim Miller has aged like fine wine, and I think he's got the power and the technique at this age to knock out Tony. He's already got the most UFC wins of all time, and if Tony could double block me, he probably would. Next up the ladder, we've got Dominick Reyes, the Dominator, versus Khalil Rountree Jr. Alright, I know some of you are going to be thinking, why do you want to do my boy Reyes like this? Khalil Rountree fights like someone has just stolen from him, or you looked at his girl the wrong way. This man is a menace, and I think if you want to propel him into the top 5, you give him another big name, another big highlight reel where he's just beating down on someone and it makes him look even more dangerous. Flipping the script, Dominick Reyes needs a win. He's gone 0-4, and most of those have been by brutal KOs, so I need to see him really get a win, get his confidence back, make sure he does against someone who everyone knows is dangerous, and reinstate himself back into the mix. If he drops to 0-5, I'd actually like to see him retire the gloves because CTE Society ain't no joke. Next up the ladder, and to end the early prelims with a bang, we've got Paddy the Baddy versus Bobby King Green. You know, Scousers, they never get knocked out, lad. Paddy must have a clone, seriously, because every time I see him weighing after a fight, he's like 230, and then only 3 weeks ago, he was weighing 155. I'll even put up an image of what he looks like recently. Let's be realistic. Paddy needs to be studied. His organs are actually built different. In my opinion, I think he'll never become champ because of his weaknesses on the feet. His grappling is phenomenal. Honestly, I think it's amazing, but he also lacks discipline outside of the cage. So we're bringing in Bobby Green because I think he needs a ranked opponent. Bobby deserves big names. He's an OG vet. He's gonna bring some thug, some hood style to the mix. You know, he's gonna have his hands down. He's gonna be walking you forward, slipping your punches, and jabbing you in the face. I think this is a win-win for both sides. This is good for Paddy. He gets a ranked opponent if he gets the win, and Bobby gets another big name on the list. Next up the ladder with Dominick Cruz versus Cody Garbrandt 2. Yes, Cody's title performance was one of the best title performances of all time. He was emoting mid-fight against the best bantamweight at that time, and even considered now still Dominick Cruz. Recently though, Cody suffered back-to-back knockouts. Is his chin ever going to recover? Is it ever going to be the same? That's the question you ask yourself every single time he fights. And with Dominick, people have figured out the puzzle. He's no longer as elusive with his figure 8 footwork and his jabbing and his awkward movements. He's now getting punished for the exact thing that gave him success. This is a storyline of a battle comeback versus a battle of redemption. So I want to see these guys come back into it, and I think this is a perfect spot for them. Next up the ladder, we've got Aljamain the Funk Master Sterling versus Calvin Kattar. So if you look at my screen, It says light heavyweight. Let's not look at that. This is a featherweight fight. Aljamain himself, in my opinion, deserves a better name than Calvin Kattar. He's a former champ with some legacy to that name. Give that boy some respect. Put him up against Brian Ortega, someone who's been ducking the entire UFC roster for years now, either through injury or what have you. I don't care. I want to see T-City get subbed by Aljamain, put some hype on that boy's name. But that's not realistic. Calvin Kattar has already been listed for this fight, and I think Aljo can get the job done. He's got knee problems, although if Aljamain somehow fumbles the bag, I think Calvin Kattar can definitely pounce on him with that boxing, Aljo leaving his chin exposed, and yet here you know it, out on the canvas once again. Next up the ladder, we've got a battle of the wildest man in the UFC, Jiri Prochazka versus Johnny Walker. Yes, I feel like this would be as fun as it gets. Both of these guys come in with reckless abandonment for themselves. They only think offensively, and I genuinely think both of these guys have enough power to knock each other out. Johnny Walker gets knocked out, let's be honest, like he's a cartoon character. Sometimes he's flailing in the air, his eyes are rolling back, he is a goofy person when he's conscious as well, and I think Jiri trains like he's out of an anime series. He's in the woods, chopping trees down with his legs and his hands. What is going on here? Jiri needs another redemption back to the belt, needs an opponent that has some respect on his name, and Walker is that guy. Walker was on a 5-fight winning streak until Ankalaev illegally kneed him in the head, and Walker started talking about desert biomes like he's in Minecraft. Next up the list, we've got Khamzat Boars Chimaev versus Jared the Cannon Man Cannonier. Yes, Khamzat, his days are over of steamrolling opponents. Kill everybody, it's over with. Now you're talking about the real threats of the UFC. He still hasn't beat a ranked middleweight. So if you want to rock the boat and you want to get a title shot, you need to do it against someone who actually has validity. Cannonier has power in all of his limbs. If he can survive the early onslaught of the grappling, he can definitely put out Chimaev's lights. And I think whoever wins this fight is bound to get the UFC's title shot after DDP versus Strickland. My opinion, Khamzat Chimaev can get it done, but if he can't get it done in round 1, it's over for him. Next up the ladder. And now the main event of the prelims. Yes, Kamaru, the CEO of EPO Usman versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. Usman has had a rough run recently, going 1-3 in his last 4. It's not the guy that we used to know. He's not even Marty from Nebraska anymore, and Shavkat himself has all of his wins, all by finish. Seriously, if there wasn't a ref in there, no man is walking out alive. I do think, however, Usman has all of the tools to crack anybody's chin, walk forward with his pressure, defend submissions, and press the pace. But Shavkat is deadly everywhere. Yes, he doesn't have a lot of head movement, but do you even need some when you've got his chin? He's got like a Max Holloway chin at this point. The shots he was taking from Jeff Neal was unreal. Shavkat would most definitely get a title shot over this. I don't know where this would land Usman, but I want to see this fight. Maybe it's just the old cycle, the old feeds the new. But if there's one guy on this earth right now that can beat Shavkat, I believe it's Kamaru Usman. Next up the ladder, and to start off the main card, we've got Dustin the Diamond Poirier versus Colby Chaos Covington. Yes, both of these gentlemen had beef back at American Top Team, but we never got to see it, and I would love to see it now. Why? Because both of their stocks have fallen. Dustin recently got head kick KO'd by Gaethje for the BMF belt, and Covington worked up a storm, talking so much smack to Edwards, only to crap the bed in front of his dad, Donald Trump. So, they only want big money. This would be a shot at Dustin to come into the welterweight division, maybe get a chance at the belt eventually, and Covington, I think at this point, just get some big fights, some big names, and sail out to sea, buddy. Up the ladder we go. We've got Justin the Highlight Gaethje versus Max Blessed Holloway for the BMF belt. Alright, I know some of you are already going to be upset by this fight, But I love Max as well, just so you know. And the thought of Gaethje landing bombs and possibly being the first one to crack Max's coconut chin is daunting. Holloway deserves this fight, however. He's asked for it, and he's fought nothing but killers since his debut to this day. The same could be said about Gaethje. That's why this fight actually makes sense. I want Max to fill out his frame though, and I want him to be able to land significant damage. I don't want a Dustin Poirier versus Max Holloway 2 at 155 all over again. And this is the downside. Both of these guys are the next in line for their title shots at 145 for Max and at 155 for Gaethje. So the downside is pretty big, but the upside for UFC 300 would be massive. A barn burner fight on the card that's meant for casuals and hardcore fans alike. I'd love to see it. This card itself needs name value, and both of these BMFs bring it. Next up the ladder, we've got Leon Rocky Edwards versus Belal Muhammad 2. Listen guys, I'm not really hyped about this bout compared to the other ones, but this card does need a number one contender versus champion fight. Belal's streak has it all, and let me go through it for you. His 9-fight win streak consists of beating prospects like Brady, vets like Thompson, and top 5 fighters like Durinho. His run has the whole package. He deserves the shot. And Leon took virtually no damage against Covington at UFC 296 in December. So keep the champ active. Run this bout back. Everyone gets the respect and the division stays fresh. Next up the list, we've got Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira 3 for our co-main event. Talk about a banger. This will be the first trilogy completed on this card. Chama Epoatan has hands that are stones and stoicism personified. And Adesanya just had to open up his mouth. He was a dominant, reigning champion and mentioned Pereira saying, "This man will talk about me, that he beat me once." And all of a sudden, Pereira decides to come to the UFC and shake everything up. It's now 1-1. Pereira's moved up a division. He's now the champion at 205. The ball's in his court. The rivalry is tied in the UFC. Their battles before the UFC and in the UFC together will always echo through the tales of time, and I want to see them wrap it up. Let's see who the main character really is of this arc. Next and last up the ladder, we've got Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 3. Yes, this is the perfect UFC 300 main event. Let me tell you why. McGregor these days is a drunken, injury-burdened, washed version of himself. No longer are the days of him just doing what he wants, coming in here, causing a ruckus, knocking people out in the first round. McGregor himself has all of the name value, all of the stardom, but his skills have deteriorated. Also, Nate Diaz is in the same bracket. He's old, but he is still dangerous. Smoking his weed, being a vegan, going on his marathons, his triathlons. But Nate is not the type of guy to come in there and finish the top prospects or the champions. So this card is all about casuals and hardcore fans alike, and this fight is the epitome. This is the fight originally that brought the worlds together. It collided. It brought MMA onto the map, and this is why I'd like to see it get closed out. It would be perfect on this main event. Nate Diaz is still dangerous. I still believe he has the ability to finish McGregor. He can either wear down the storm with his patented forward pressure and put it on him, sub him if need be, and whoever wins this fight walks away into the sunset, completing their biggest rivalry ever on the biggest stage, biggest platform, and most stacked UFC card of all time. And that's it. That's the UFC 300 Dream Card. If you have any other fights that you think should have been added or removed, drop them down below. If you want to see more of this content, like and subscribe, and stay notified for future updates. Ciao.